Welcome back. You're watching NewsX. My name is Vineet Malhotra. The economic survey was, in fact, put out today. It does paint a very impressive picture of where India is going, and where India has been. It also talks about the GDP and what is projected in the next fiscal year. It also talks about this fiscal year and where India is trying to regroup after a much devastating pandemic which took the world as well as our country by storm. You just heard experts talk about how we stand in comparison to where China is today, where the Americans are, and where the world economy is today as well. We have recouped, we have renewed our energy. There is much galvanization at the behest of the government in terms of the capital expenditure and all the issues which have pertained post the pandemic. We'll talk about what these issues are and what can be done to fix concerns such as infrastructure development, the fiscal deficit, which has become, in fact, a prick for the party every now and then. Joining us on the show is Mr. Akash Jindal, senior economist. Mr. Rajiv Gupta, senior economist, also joins me on the platform. Kishore Subramaniam, he is also a senior economist, and NG Khetan, economist, joins us on the show as well. Mr. Jindal, I'd like to begin with you, sir, if you can hear me. Mr. Jindal? Okay, Mr. Gupta, if you can hear me. Mr. Rajiv Gupta, are you there with us? Okay. Mr. Subramaniam, Mr. Kishore Subramaniam?
Yeah.
Mr. Subramaniam, you've heard the takeaways from the economic survey. India is a bright spot when it comes to the world economy. India is the only market where, the pre-pandemic levels have returned to full blown extent as well. This is also a result of, the aggressive stance that the government has taken when it comes to expenditure and rationalization every budget. But where do you think, we are going from here? The GDP is projected to go slightly, marginally lesser than what it is in the fiscal year. But, we are more or less tuning and adjusting ourselves to where the world economy is today.
Yeah. So as far as the expectation is concerned, my personal expectation is India will keep growing north of 6.5%. That is going to be India's growth in terms, and I think the economic survey has also pointed out towards the number. What I need to give a credible appreciation is to the RBI, who has been able to take the headwinds and manage inflation very well. It was quite fairly aggressive, at the same time not doing it over and ensuring that the credit takeaway doesn't stop, because there is a huge and robust credit takeaway that is happening from the banks, specifically the public sector and the private consumption. Yes, we have certain anomalies with regards to the tax structure, which we would need to see if the changes are happening. But in terms of India, it will be an isolated island of growth in the world, and we would be probably the only economy and the largest economy at the pace at which we are growing. So what we need to see is that the disparity of income has to go down. The number of middle class people or the lower middle class ushering into the middle class has to be increased. The anomalies of the tax has to be reduced, and we see India as one bright spot. And with the strategy of China +1 and +1 everywhere, I think India is going to be a great beneficiary of that, subject to the fact that the pace at which we are doing this infrastructure growth across the country keeps happening, and our banking system becomes robust in giving away more credit and allocating certain industry status to probably industries like tourism and stuff, and then we can really take off. That's my take.
All right. Mr. Khetan, if you can hear me, sir. Mr. Khetan?
Yeah, I'm here.
Right. Well, important takeaways that, India's GDP is perhaps going to dip a little bit. But considering the economic and political developments around the world, we have tided against the worst wave of, economic slowdown in the last couple of years. Now, the big challenge is over. The smaller challenges, such as, how to galvanize employment in MSMEs, how to, in fact, push the healthcare into preparedness for the next catastrophe is perhaps going to be on the government's agenda.
You see, according to me, India has never seen a better time economically. You see, as far as any economy in the world is based on consumption. And India is, if you see the GST's collection that, it is hovering over 1.5 lakhs crores. And that is the sign that, your consumption is going up. You have the budget estimate says that you will be able to collect over 16 lakhs crore on account of GST. That itself is a very big sign. Now, let me tell you one thing. Two chapters have been included in this economic survey. These are the two new chapters. One is the chapter on the social sector, and another is on a climate change and environment. I think these are two most important things. India contributed last year over 75,000 rupees in terms of Food Security Act and other social sectors which they transferred money to, direct money transferred is 75,000 rupees per annum. Now you see what has happened with that. Maybe this money, because of the food security, the per capita income may be low in India, but this extra money which they came into their hand, this has really pumped up the economy. Because when you give money to the people and when your food security is there and you have the extra income, then you put in that money in consumption. So I personally feel that your growth story of 6%, you have the highest growth story in the country, in the world. Your GDP is 6% or over 6%, it will be the highest in the world, not for in 2023, but in 2024 itself. If you look at the GDP growth of other parts of the world, say USA, in 2023, they say that the USA GDP would be hovering around 1%, which is the largest economy in the world. The 50% of the world growth would come from India and China. And it is only 1/10 of the growth, where the growth engine of the world would come from USA and European Union. So therefore, all said and done, I think it's a golden era for India. There will be huge investment. Infrastructure is they are pumping in money in infrastructure. The only cause of worry is the rate of interest would be high. Because of the inflation, the rate of interest would be high. And because of the war going on, there is a challenge as to the current account deficit. Because we will be importing more and more on account of oil, whereas our export to the European Union and other countries will be vitally affected. So therefore, our exports would be low, where our cost of import would be high. So this will give a little on a current account deficit, will be pressure on current account deficit. That I think is the only area of concern which I foresee in the next 2 years. If the war goes, there is no war, I think the situation will improve. But if the war continues, I think we will have a challenge on the current account deficit. But I think in all other areas, it will be a boom area and boom conditions for the country.
Okay, all right. Mr. Gupta, if you can hear me?
Mr. Yeah, I can hear. Yeah.
Right, Mr. Gupta, there's also been a talk about recessionary trends, which are prevalent and rampant throughout the world at this point in time. The fears of recession, which have been heightened by these massive layoffs in big tech, is also concerning to the government and the people who are in fact predicting India's economic growth. But at the same time, there will be a cushion which India will get to enjoy. And that is the result of the dynamics of our economy.
No, I think I am 100% with the other two speakers. I think India is poised at a very nice spot. I remember having met Mr. Jaitley very, very long back, and he used to talk about infrastructure-led growth. And that has been the kind of policy that the government has been following. Infrastructure investments have been happening. And today, if you really go out anywhere, you can actually see it with your own eyes the way the roads, etc., the infrastructure is being built. That is humongous, which leads to a lot of employment on one side, and it also kind of aids the economy in many, many other fashions. There used to be this problem with India that our logistics used to be about 14-15% of the cost. And this logistics cost had to be reduced in terms of making India competitive. So all of that is happening. I think with that, we have about 22-23 lakh crores of revenue, which happens from direct indirect taxes. We have about 40 odd lakh crore of expenditure, which we are envisaging, I think. And we have about 27-28% of our GDP going into capex, which is capital expenditure. So all of that I think is all good. As you rightly said, there are headwinds because today we are not living in isolation. So whenever there is something that happens in the entire world, that is likely to have an impact on the country as well. And that is what probably is reflected in the slightly lower growth rates that are being projected. Those lower growth rates can, to my mind, be even a little bit more lower, but it will still be comparatively several times that of other countries. So I think that shouldn't bother us too much. The other thing that should be bothering us a little bit is that our debt to GDP ratio is climbing. We have I think come up to now 86-87%. Of course, much below a lot of the other developed world. But that kind of creates a burden on repayment of our debt. And my understanding is today that about 9-10 lakh crores out of the budgeted amount has to go back to servicing the debt. So in all of this, the importance is how efficiently is the money invested in infrastructure development, and if this high, the fiscal deficit is also about 6.5% or so, if I'm not mistaken. And with that fiscal deficit, obviously the borrowings become higher, and with those borrowings become higher, you have to allocate more money for servicing the debt. So in this kind of a situation, one has to be very careful in terms of money being wisely spent on capex and infrastructure, so that the rate of growth is somehow keeping pace with the kind of money that is being borrowed. So that is the only thing that we need to be careful about. There would be headwinds from the world. There is no doubt about that. Also, I think it is absolutely on the cards. Layoffs is an indication of that. Layoffs is a kind of this thing to that. But on the overall this thing, India seems to be absolutely on the right track.
All right, India is absolutely on the right track. Mr. Subramaniam, if you can hear me, sir. Mr. Subramaniam?
Yes, I can hear you.
The survey also talks about inflation, and that is a concern for the RBI as well. Whenever the inflation rates hover above 6%, it's a cause of concern for the RBI. But the economic survey also goes on to say that perhaps this is a projection, and the capital push as well as the push in demand may actually cover or eclipse the inflation that the government or we as consumers may be so worried about.
Yeah, so as far as inflation is concerned, let us understand that this is a global phenomenon. It is not related to India alone, and we have seen historic inflation. If you look at America, America is in a phase where it's having the highest inflation in the last 4 decades. But remember, whenever there is growth happening consecutively for a long time, though I do understand that in between we had 2 COVID years where the growth dipped, and that's why the fiscal deficit went up. So inflation will happen. So I expect India in the coming decade, if it has to be the engine of growth for the world or the isolated spot or the island for growth, inflation is not going to taper down to sub 4 levels. That's not going to happen. You can never achieve, fast-paced growth. You take the case of China. They have never achieved growth at a sub 2%, sub 3%. It's only the developed economies like America or Europe which has operated at that suboptimal level of textbook inflation, which we call. But what is going to happen is that what we need is moderation. And I think RBI under Mr. Shaktikanta Das has done a wonderful job in attacking it head on, and I think we have come to a fair position where it is sort of saturated or stabilized. I don't see any further rate hikes from the repo or the central bank per se, and even if it's happening, until and unless it is event-based, triggered by event-based. See, Ukraine or many such global events, because we need to understand one thing, that across US, Europe, the world, we are entering a recessionary phase. And when we are entering a recessionary phase, the Fed is also expected to hike the rate. So there might be a possibility of a 0.25%, 0.5% hike if it is event based. Otherwise, I think we are at the top end of the curve, but inflation will tackle and settle out here. And maybe over the period of the next 1 to 2 years, I expect inflation to drop by 100 to 150 basis points and then settle. Because you can't have a sub 4 level and keep growing at 7-8%. Because if India really wants to become a developed nation, a global leader in the next decade, we have to hit the accelerator now. And no position is better than what we are today. With a great foreign exchange reserve, CAD is definitely a problem. But if you look at all our neighbors and the world economy per se, we are probably having the best demographic incentive to grow at a pace. And we should grow at 7.5 and above as a decadal average. This year, I'm hoping anywhere between 6.5 to 6.9 or 7 at the top limit, until and unless there is event-based shock. But inflation will settle down. I don't think so that we need to be worried about that at this point of time.
Right, Mr. Khitan. Well, the economic survey also talks about the global factors. You know, there is inflation, food inflation all across the world, and banks have actually also tightened a lot of financial conditions. And some of these developed countries have, advanced countries have economies that are slowing down. Is that going to have any bearing on our outlook and our projection?
First, let me say something about the inflation. Only yesterday, the IMF has come out with a report. And the report of the IMF says that from 6.8% inflation this year, next year 2023, our inflation will come down to 5%. And in 2024, our inflation will come down to 4%. They also say globally the inflation is going to come down. So therefore, inflation would be there, but it is going to come down and taper down within periods to come. Now, as far as the recession is concerned, you see, if you see the latest IMF report, it says that one third of the total, 1/3 of the world would be under recession. Now, fortunately, India is not a part of it. I mean, India is not a part of that recession, and we will not be suffering. Otherwise, what would have happened? We would not have been able to collect over 1.5 lakhs to 1.6 lakhs GST. Because if there would have been a recession, there would not have been a consumption. And let me tell you also one thing, that the Food Security Act has played a very vital role in the growth of our economy. Because what has happened, because of the Food Security Act, we have raised the per capita income of our people. You know, the per capita income has gone up. And because the per capita income has gone up indirectly, so therefore, you know, they are pumping in money to buy more and more things. And let me also tell you one thing, that the recent survey says that 31% of our household in India today earn between 5 lakhs to 30 lakhs rupees per year. Now that is, you understand, 31% of the household in India earning between 5% to earning between 5 lakhs to 30 lakhs per year. Now this is in terms of the dollar term. Now if you take it on terms of the purchasing power parity, it would be 2 to 3 times more, because our goods are cheaper. So therefore, if 31% of the household of this country is earning between 5 lakhs per annum to 30 lakhs per annum, there is no question that we will go under inflation. In fact, the report further says that India has gone out of the extreme poverty. There is no more poverty. There are destitute people. There is about 10 to 12% of the population which is earning below 1.25 lakhs per year. But then, you know, the social security gives them enough leverage to lead a healthy life. We have social security. That is why in this budget, they have included one chapter on social security. And one of the most important chapter also they have included is in the climate control. I think I mean, the whole economy has been controlled and whole economy has been handled so meticulously and wonderfully by the RBI and by the government of India, by their fiscal policies, that we could not have become one of the fastest growing economy of the world by doing nothing. I mean, the world there is a recession all over the world. The GDP growth has gone down all over the world. The world GDP would be to the extent of 2%. our GDP growth would be over 6%. Now, this would not have happened unless our fiscal policies, unless our economic policies would have been at the right path. I think we are at the right path. We should be proud that, the Indian economy is going to be the fastest growing economy in the world. We will, in fact, the prediction is that Amrit Kal by 2047, our GDP would be to the extent of $23 trillion. I mean, we should be proud of it. I mean, to have an economy of $23 trillion by 2047, which Amrit Kal has started last year. And we have, in 2026, we will beat Germany. By 2030, we will take over from Japan. We will be the third largest economy. And if you look at the purchasing power parity, we are already the third largest economy of the world. So I think it's a win-win situation for us.
Mr. Akash Jindal also joins us on the program. Mr. Jindal, if you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Mr. Jindal, we've spoken about how India is going to, basically bypass this recessionary trend that has plagued the world so far. There is more investment coming into India. There is, the spirit and the sentiment of investment is much higher. The economic survey also went on to say that the private sector investment is going to find a boost and a fillip, and that is going to be the highlight and the high point with which we can, assertively say that India is the fastest growing economy in the world.
Vineet, thank you for using this wonderful word bypass. You have used it very well. I think this is the theme. We are definitely going to bypass the global recession because, as you very well know, economy like US, 2 quarters of negative GDP growth last year. This year, UK and Germany are expected to exhibit negative GDP growth. China has only shown 3%, whereas India, during this global recession also, we are expected to grow 6 to 6.8%. So not only have we bypassed the biggest of the economies of the world, like US, the biggest economy, China, second biggest economy, Germany, fourth biggest, UK is behind us, almost sixth biggest economy. But even the smaller economies have fared badly. We have done so many shows on Sri Lanka. Pakistan is in dire straits. So India is one economy under the visionary guidance of Prime Minister Modi. We have sailed through troubled times. We are the fastest GDP growing country in the world. And plus, by 2027, we will be the third biggest economy. This is not what Akash Jindal or Akash Jindal daughter are saying. Global agencies are saying. Further global agencies are saying that by 2035, we will be a $10 trillion economy. That's what expected from our economy. So I think we have done wonderful management. During Corona, our government provided ration to so many of our brothers and sisters, BPL brothers and sisters.
Mr. Jindal, should we worry about the tech layoffs? Is that a concern for India?
Regarding what?
The tech layoffs.
Tech layoff, yes, I'm with you. It is partially a concern for India because there are many Indians who could be working for tech companies. So global would have...
Okay, all right, Mr. Jindal, we've also run out of time. Appreciate all my guests for being a part of this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.